Hello and welcome to today's Rocksmith Developer Stream. I am your host and the community developer on Rocksmith, Doug Lilly. Very glad to have you all here today. Today we're going to do most of the things that we usually do on the stream. We're going to play some songs. We're going to talk about music. We're going to have some giveaways, and we're going to see some guitar building from our own Dan Emmerich. But we're going to do it in a little bit of a different order today because Dan Emmerich decided to just unload with content. So that's coming up towards the end of the stream, as will the raffles will come a bit later. But yeah, welcome. Again, very glad to have you. And we can just go ahead and go right into it. I'd like to introduce our discussion guest for today, Leila Abdul Rauf. Welcome.
Thank you
to the stream. You've been here pretty recently. It's glad to have you. I'm glad to have you back so soon. I think last time we had you on, we mostly talked about metal, right?
That's right.
It's my memory served. Okay. Today we're going in a very different direction. I think maybe you might disagree, but we're going to talk about some of your solo music and another project that is decidedly not metal, and we're going to talk about experimental music. So maybe a little bit headier, maybe a little bit more ethereal in tone today. But that's the discussion we're going to have, and I'm really excited to have it. So please, to get started, let us know what it is that you do with your solo group and Ionophore.
Great. Yeah. My solo project, it is sort of a, if I were to describe it genre-wise, it's ambient. Ambient's just this huge umbrella of a genre. There's sort of a continuum of musicality versus amusicality, atonality, less melodic, less rhythmic, more immersive and textural, and then a huge in between. And I'd say I'd fall somewhere in between that. It's more similar to something you would hear on a movie soundtrack. Just a lot more scaled down, more minimal instrumentally and compositionally. Yeah.
All right. And I do want to remind our viewers that if they have questions for Leila or myself, please hit up UB Jurassic in the chat. That is our community manager in North Carolina. He's going to get your questions to us because we might have some good ones about this discussion. So when you first sort of became aware of this genre that we'll call the ambient kind of experimental music, was there a particular song or artist or something that you heard that inspired you to be like, that's something that I can get into, that's something that I am interested in doing? Or did you find that on your own?
Yeah, well, kind of. So there's sort of my first memory of listening to music that's more in the experimental ambient noise umbrella category at some point in my early teens, like most of the music that I explored, and a lot of the stuff that I still listen to now was stuff I loved when I was 14 years old. I think a lot of people probably have a similar experience of that. Absolutely. It's like you're just discovering everything at the same time, and it's overwhelming, it's exciting, it's new. So between the time that I was exposed to the music versus the time that I decided I want to start performing, recording, composing it, we're talking, roughly a 20-year gap.
Sure.
So artists like Brian Eno, which I would say he was sort of a pioneer in bridging the ambient and pop genre in the 70s. And a lot of the stuff, I listened to classical music before. I studied the trumpet and the flute when I was in elementary school. And so I was exposed to a lot of classical music. A lot of the classical music that came out in the early 20th century did sort of lead into that experimental sound with composers like John Cage. he wrote a piece that is supposed to last 640 years or somewhere around that time frame, and it's being performed live in a church in Germany.
Just as we
And
speak, it's just been.
it's just been going on, and it's I think it's called As Slow as Possible is the name of the composition, and
Yeah.
it took 6 years for a chord change to happen, and it was this big event, and it
Like
was
people like show
televised.
up to hear this.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's going through this pipe organ, and you see someone changing out the pipes, changing the lengths of the pipes to make the chord change.
Oh
But
wow.
yeah, so I mean that's a very extreme example.
So
Um,
in this case, my assumption would be that the person, whether they're I don't know what you would call someone who adjusts or fixes pipe organs, but I assume they kind of become part of the performance, right? They become a
yeah,
performer in this.
right, right, yeah.
Interesting.
Um, and I forgot what your other question was. Um, how I started playing it, how I started.
Yeah. What sort of drove you to think like this is something that I want to do? Like this is
Okay,
some like I want to like I don't know if you got like you're like I want to get away from sort of Western musical tropes and ideas and move more into this counter direction of that.
right, right. I was in a band in the mid aughts that touched on some of it. It was a little more traditional. There was a violin player and a cellist. Actually, Jackie Gratz, who
Oh yeah.
was at Ubisoft, was in the band before I actually joined, and I think we actually appear on one album together. But I think that experience in that band sort of was the catalyst for me to start exploring on my own. And really, I can pinpoint the time when I told myself, okay, I'm going to sit down and start recording my own music, which I had never done before.
Yeah.
Um, and that was after a festival that we performed at in Poland, and there was a a group called Soviet France that has been around for decades from England that has kind of done all sorts of iterations, have gone through all different iterations of membership. But I think there are one or two guys that are like the main guys in the project, and their performance captivated me so much. I got lost
That's
in
good.
it, and was so immersed in the sound. It wasn't it wasn't particularly harsh music. There was something relaxing about it, but it had a form and it had a direction. But it was something that you couldn't really pinpoint, like, okay, here's this section of the song. Here's this verse and here's another verse. It was like this continuous, sound that was probably about an hour long with no gaps. It was just this evolving piece, and it was so inspiring that I after I got home I started fiddling with GarageBand because I had
Yeah.
no idea. uh, I didn't have access to any tools at that point, and that was
All
the
right.
sort of seedling to my first album.
Cool, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm gonna throw out a bit of a caveat. With a lot of these questions, I'm dwelling in a lot of my own ignorance and assumptions. Uh, that being said, when you and I have my ideas for this, but I'm not the expert. I'm not the one who does this. So if you cast aside the sort of expected elements of melody, harmony, rhythm, what are you left with? What terrain, what musical terrain are you working within and sort of leaning into?
That's an interesting question because depending on what end of the spectrum of musicality that you're working with, which I'd say the music that I make is probably more musical than a lot of ambient composers. There is melody, harmony, and rhythm, but just in a different axis, in a different
Sure.
uh, you know, you're not using the pop music template of guitar, bass, drum, keyboard, lead vocalist
Right.
format. You know, the main melody could be a segment of piano that's looped, and that could be the sound bed, and then you can use other instruments to harmonize with that sound bed and use rhythm in a more oblique way. You know, you can basically make a rhythm out of anything. You can
Sure.
loop the sound of knocking on a piece of wood, or taking a mallet and you know, scraping it against a cymbal or something like that.
So would it be fair to say that those elements aren't necessarily subtracted, but they serve a different function than they would?
Definitely.
Okay, great, thank you. And you were talking about so the instrumentation you use. You in your pieces you do use trumpet, you use piano. What are some of the other uh, elements, sounds, instruments that you use typically?
Yeah, so I could go through this list, but if you were actually listen to it, you wouldn't even know that's what
Right.
that is. So, and in fact, I don't even consider myself to be a um, a very advanced trumpet player. I was probably a better trumpet player when I was 11 years old than I am now. Uh, I don't really practice very much, but so the thing that this kind of music lets you do, it lets you explore things without necessarily having to be a technically proficient player, but you can make a very evocative piece of music with by just experimenting with it with traditional instruments in a non-traditional way. So so when I started the project, I think it's been 8 years now. um, I I knew I wanted to use trumpet and piano and voice, but I made all those things sound very different. Like, and I would do that with manipulating the pitch of a
Yeah.
recording, speed it up, slow it down, layer it, and it sounds like a completely different instrument. I can make my voice sound like a drum if I segment it a certain way and speed it up.
Sure.
Um, so I also use field recordings. I have a stockpile of sounds of insects and frogs and birds, different, you know, different times of the year. I have sounds of like distant trains.
Yeah.
That's I've been, you know, I've used that as a sound bed. On my most recent album, I used a glockenspiel, which is you know, like a looks like a xylophone. It's made out of steel, and it's um, you know, basically bells, the sound of bells. And then I would take that and manipulate the speeds of that, and it, you know, I could make it sound like all different kind of mallet instruments.
Yeah.
Um,
So in this, how does the function of the instrument change? How does the function of the recording process sort of play into the construction of a song or the composition of a piece?
yeah, so the thing that I think really, at least from my experience, um, the difference in the way that I approach recording ambient music versus recording a metal album is that the production is actually part of the composition. So you're producing as you're composing. Um, so I could lay down a sample that I recorded of crickets, and in the digital audio workstation or DAW, I would loop it, um, and then I would layer it, or I would hear kind of a melody from the crickets, and then
Yeah.
I would think of a trumpet melody based on that. That's almost a counterpoint to that.
Okay. Interesting. So when you I would like to talk about composition a bit. When you set down to uh, write, record, compose a piece, is how much of it is plotted out or thought of ahead? Do you have specific goals or ideas in mind when you first sit down with a piece, or does it all happen sort of organically as you start?
Um, for me personally, it's a very spontaneous work as I go process. So the way I approach an album is I'll compose maybe two or three what I call the mother tracks of the
Yeah.
album, and they're usually pretty different sounding, and they all have different instruments. And then I think about how am I going to bridge these mother tracks together to make a cohesive experience.
Okay.
So based on what I do for the first couple of songs I lay down will dictate what comes after and where I want to sequence it. But within the song, as I'm tracking apart, yeah, I have no idea what I'm going to do, and I like the spontaneity of deciding as I go.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you ever kind of go into it with certain beyond the you call them the mother tracks or
that's my
seed
term
tracks?
for it.
Your term. Besides those, do you ever go in with any specific limitations or uh, goals, or do those all just sort of come? Do you take what you need when you need it, add it in, and let go?
It depends. Sometimes I do. Sometimes it's really good to set limitations just to get started because it can be really overwhelming to get started on a project if you don't have
Sure.
a particular focus. Like for the most recent album I just completed, I knew I wanted glockenspiel all over it. I didn't know how. I didn't know
Yeah.
what the melodies were going to be.
Yeah.
Sometimes I literally just press record and start playing, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. But that spontaneous practices, I think it's really great for a number of reasons. You don't get locked into a particular, everything being the same all the time. But also, uh, I think I know we're going to talk about live performance in a bit, but it
Yeah.
does connect with that too. It leaves things open uh, to improvise, and improvisation I think is a very important element in experimental ambient composition.
Okay. And do you find yourself editing? Is like once you have sort of the tracks laid out, uh, are they pretty much like once they're done and once you've picked out the sounds and layered them in the way that you like, is there much editing? Is there much removing or mixing, or is that all
Yeah.
just part of the process as you go?
Well, yeah, the editing and mixing is happening sometimes as I track, and then it's almost an endless process of editing and mixing after I lay down the rough content. But the editing and mixing is also a compositional tool. It's not just a post-production process.
Right.
Like if you were to write a traditional song, you get the takedown you want, and then all the editing and mixing happens after. But the editing and mixing in my process happens uh, uh, during and after. It's sort of an endless process. And then between the tracks, you might want to merge two tracks together, or have different versions of a track where you pull away certain elements and create a new track based on that. So that's why I call it a mother track, because
Gotcha.
literally those tracks are like birthing the new tracks.
So full albums, I guess would tend to be for you more cohesive than traditional rock or metal or pop music
Yeah,
album.
I really, yeah, I like it to be a seamless experience,
Okay,
which is kind of ironic because most of my songs end up running between 4 or 5 minutes, which is pretty short for an ambient composition.
sure, yeah.
But that's just the way I like to do it.
You mentioned performance. You mentioned playing live. What for you is the sort of the role of this type of music in a live setting? Like, is how do you what are the expectations of you as performer for the audience who would listen to something that's not necessarily as concrete. I guess, you're not going to have a bunch of people necessarily bobbing their head to the same way. What's the role of the live performance for you?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with the venue.
Okay.
So if you're, I find that they tend to be more in intimate spaces. It'll work better if you're performing in more intimate spaces, because if you're playing this kind of music in a bar, you just hear people talking and drinking, and that can be really disruptive. It's like trying to
Yeah.
perform a classical symphony when you're in a bar. It's
And
not it's not a very ideal
Right.
environment. And if I do, which I have played in bars and festivals, I always try to tell the sound people, crank the house volume as loud as possible. Just because it's delicate, quiet music, don't assume that it can't be loud.
Right.
And when they listen to me, it works really well and actually really fills the room. People uh, experience it in a very different way, and I think a big aspect of ambient performance has to do with not just the sound of the music, but the space that the sound is coming from. Space is sort of like this other dimension that a lot of experimental composers use by placing speakers and all various uh, places in a room that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah.
They could
Yeah.
be in the back of the room. They could be arranged in a circle. Um, and if you're if you're really on top of your game, you know how to manipulate the space in a way that makes it this really three-dimensional experience.
Interesting. So
Uh,
perhaps people, depending on where you are sitting or standing in the venue, you might have a much different experience as a listener than
that's
someone
right.
15, 20 feet away from you.
Exactly.
Cool. And I know you mentioned during the compositional phase, you rely a lot on improv. Does that carry over into the live setting as well when you're performing?
It actually carries even more, so it's even more improvisational live. In fact, one thing I try not to do is mimic the albums, note for note, for lack of a better word. I really just try to adapt it. uh, I really just do stuff on the spot with a lot of it, and I find that to be it. At first it can feel really scary to do that, but
Sure.
as you do it, more and more, as you gain more experience, it's such a freeing experience uh, to almost essentially compose on the spot, by
Right.
taking elements of the tracks that are on the album and repurposing them in a different way, adding different instruments. Uh, there's a lot of live looping that happens, um, and you can live loop through, with hardware or software, whatever your medium is. I
Okay.
do mine through mostly software.
Okay. I want to go back to something else you mentioned earlier. You were talking about sort of the tension, the emotional effect, and I want to talk about the emotional peaks and valleys, or the sense of sort of comfort and surprise that a more traditional like rock song might have versus something more ethereal, more ambient. How do you go about achieving those emotional peaks and valleys and those sort of upsets of surprise? Because I listened to some of the music, I listened to some of your solo music, I listened to some of Ionophore, and you get those same sensations, that cresting and that tension and release. How do you go about doing that with eschewing or relying much less on traditional Western theory and techniques and tropes?
Well, compositionally, you're still building towards something. It's not just a static sound bed that goes on forever. Although there are a lot of artists that do it that way. But for me, it's my stuff's more melodic and a little more traditional in the sense that I have lyrics. Um,
Right.
so uh, so a piece could work up to the first part of it could be instrumental, and then it works up to this epic vocal that comes in a couple of minutes later, and that's the climax, and then the fade out after that. So that's one example of doing something like that, and really just weaving, just building through volume, through build loops that build on top of each other, so they sound different through time. They change, and they get more intense. And then you usually have a mixer, so you'll gradually fade the volume and turn up another loop, and that creates this other sort of moment, emotional moment. That's just an example.
All right. And I'd really like talking about language, whether it be conversation or musical language. And I think having a language can be very vital to knowing what you want out of whatever art you're creating. In addition to things like the mother track, have you on your own developed a specific musical language for what you're trying to evoke and the processes that you use, or has the group Ionophore as a group kind of developed its own language in any capacity?
Yeah, you mean like the recording process, or?
Yeah. So instead of like we're gonna play A minor pentatonic, you might still use those chords, but are there things sort of specific to those two projects or to this genre that more traditional rock musicians might not be aware of?
Yeah, well, there's especially if you're working in a DAW, there's just the endless just working through effects. So the different reverbs, the different delays and choruses, and those. So talking about a piece that you're working on through the effects is a big part of it. I would say more than the notes that we're actually playing. We're not kind of wrapped up in okay, this is the chord structure. Although the key signature is very important. So if we're improvising something, especially live, that's very important. We'll want to know what key something is in. But it's very loose and spontaneous, and we like it that way. It's more fun, it's more exciting. There's also like a visual component. We project visuals that make it's almost like the sound is doing what you're seeing, and it works in this synergistic way that makes it a whole experience.
So you're going for as much of a sort of full experiential sensory
absolutely
process.
Yeah.
Cool. Does that visualization at all? How much of that is important to recording? Like how much would your cover art reflect the music more so than maybe your third EP as a metal band?
It's funny you bring that up, because sometimes the first process in making an album for me is what I want the cover art to look like. And I'll start with the image.
Yeah.
And then from there I might even come up with the album title before I've written a note of music, which is what happened with this most recent album I'm working on. And then the music speaks to what you're feeling when you look at the piece of art.
Interesting. So would you say, okay, so I guess going back to one of my first questions, that image, the emotional relationship between you and that image, is that sort of what you're trying to capture in the music, or is that what the music evolves from, more or less?
Well, kind of
I mean,
both.
that's very reductive, but
well, yeah, I mean, someone else could look at the same piece of art and get a different feeling from it.
Of course.
So it's subjective. It's what I'm getting out of it, and my interpretation of what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling around me. It's how it taps into my subconscious mostly.
Okay. And then I got one more question, then we're going to have to let you go. And this is going between working as a solo musician versus working as a group, compared to your metal band, compared to your post-punk band. What considerations do you have to leave for your bandmates in this sort of experimental music that you don't have to think about in a more traditional like rock or metal band?
Yeah, well, because the compositional approach is so different, I happen to work with people in Ionophore who, we all trust each other to initiate, initial piece of music, and then we all kind of chime in and do that. I think if you have that level of trust, where it's like, well, I know I'm gonna love everything you do, so just go
Right.
ahead. And
Yeah.
another consideration is, we're not too precious about if someone goes in and changes something. We're actually literally working in the same DAW session, which is
Okay.
something I don't do with my bands. So
Yeah.
we're all producing. So it's sort of all hands on deck for a particular song. And if you have the level of trust with your bandmates, you could just go in and change something, or you could create a new song out of what the person did and turn it into
Yeah.
something else.
Interesting.
So it's really flexible.
Okay.
It's a lot of fun.
And are there any limitations that you have to worry about with that, or has the trust that you've developed with that group kind of
Well,
eliminated?
it's not always perfect. Sometimes someone will change something or get rid of something. And you're like, hey, wait, I put that back in there. I love that melody. And or sometimes I'll be like, oh wow, it sounds better without it. You know, you did something better than what I did, so I'm going to go with what you just did. And so yeah, it's sort of like the less ego you have around it, the more fun you're going to have,
Okay.
and you'll learn something new in the process.
That sounds great. Thank you very much, Layla. Where can we find your music? It's going to be posted in the chat, but let's hear it from you.
Okay, yeah, it's I have a Bandcamp page, laylaabdulrauf.bandcamp.com, and then I have it's just all over Spotify. Anything I'm doing is on Spotify at this point, I think.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, and hope to have you back very soon. And we will see you soon.
Sounds good.
Thank you. And
Thanks.
we are going to have our first giveaway of the stream. So if you are live in chat, please look for UV Jurassic for your instructions on how you can win one of everything that you see right about now on your stream. This is all coming to us from our friends at Ernie Ball. You are going to get 2 sets of strings, a 6-string set for your guitar, a 4-string set for your bass. You're also going to get a dozen picks from Ernie Ball, a black guitar strap, a package of Ernie Ball Wonder Wipes, and a peg winder, and a pick or two from us here at Rocksmith. Oh, that can be yours if you win this raffle. So good luck on that. We will be shipping these out as I am able to get back to the studio to do so. We do ship internationally. If you are not in the U.S., I just ask that you separate your address line by line to make it a little bit easier for me to help make sure that you actually get your prize when I can ship those out. And right now we are going to hear from our performers of today. Today we are glad to have Audrey and Kate back. They've got some news that's going to come after their performances. So I'm just going to kick it over to them. Here's Audrey and Kate.
Watch your romance. Watch your romance. I want you to be. I want you to see. I want you everything as long as it's free. I want you to love. Love, love, love. I want you drama and touch of your hair. I want you in the sun, kiss in the sand. I want your love. What was that song?
So how was it playing those two songs, Kate? Amazing.
It was funnest.
It was funnest. We both love these songs a lot, man.
Yes.
Oh, and yes, we have albums out now.
Yes.
17 months, number 1 to number 5. We're super happy to release this is our first album to release.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Wow, that sucks.
And then we could release 5 of them. So if you guys wanted to check it out, please check it out. There are some pretty crazy songs in there too. So
Yes, like toilet ramen and stuff.
yeah, like
You
toilet
guys
ramen.
should really get out of here.
Be prepared for those. Oh my goodness, my voice. Thank you guys so much for watching.
Okay, guys, thank you guys so much for watching.
We'll see you guys again on another video. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
And thank you again to the always wonderful Audrey and Kate. You can find them on Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter at Audrey123Talks. You just saw the new 5 album set that just released. That's on Spotify, I know. Just look up Audrey and Kate. That easy. Thank you so much for sending us those songs. And right now, speaking of songs, I'm going to give away some. We're going to give away 5 copies of Variety Pack 19 for Steam. So if you're in the chat right now, listen to UB Jurassic once more. That is Brian Turner. He will get you. He will tell you how you can win one of these 5 song packs, 5 copies of the song pack in Variety Pack 19. We've got Big Country with In a Big Country, Bob Marley and the Wailers, Stir It Up, The Meters, Sissy Strut, and White Zombies, More Human Than Human. So good luck on those raffles. And before we kick it off to the next segment, we did get one more question for Layla, but I didn't see it until right after we split. Biskovid asked how I lost it. I lost the question. I'm going to find it. Biskovid asks, I'd be curious to see how she catalogs her sounds. How can you keep track of and know where to find, quote, that one sample of that one insect from that one evening? So I asked her, the answer we got was she uses Dropbox. She just alphabetizes and uses a word search to find it. When she's collaborating with her band, Ionophore, they tend to use Google Docs with multiple versions of tracks, and they can all just work on those together at the same time. So that's how word search. She knows, I guess she just knows the sounds. She has an ear for the sounds, knows what she's recorded, knows what she wants. Or I'm not sure I didn't get to ask her. She might just spend a long time listening to sounds and looking for things that pique her interest in that moment. So thank you, Biskabit, for the question. And now we are going to say hello once more to the person, the voice in my ear, who's been running the board for us this whole time, Dan Emmerich. He recently worked on a new guitar, and we're going to see the first part of that process right now. Here's Dan.
Hey everybody, it's Dan, and I'm about to start building a new guitar, and I thought you might like to come along with me as I do at least some of that stuff. I've got all the parts that I need for a Cabronita Telly. This is a Telly with vintage TV Jones sort of like Gretsch Filtertron pickups in it. Sounds very different from a Telly. It's much more rock voiced. It's very muscular, different routing and everything. I haven't made any of these parts. I've got the parts. This was a gift. I wound up buying all the rest of the stuff. I got a neck, I've got pickups, I've got wiring, but none of it is together. And so that means that I am starting purely from parts, and I have to make it all into a playable, fun guitar. I'm starting that now, and I figured it might be worth documenting some of that. So if you've ever wondered, can I put together a guitar from parts? I can. Well, I guess we're going to find out if I can, but you probably can too. And so I'll share what I'm learning as I go. I've repaired a few guitars, but I've never put one together from parts from scratch. So this is a first, so let's go. All right, so we're starting with the body, obviously a fantastic metallic purple color. This all just came finished. This is as you see it. I believe it's basswood. So this is finished, primed, everything that you would need. It's got holes for 1 volume, 1 tone, and a toggle selector switch between the 2 pickups that's going to be here. It's also pre-drilled for a hardtail bridge, a fixed bridge. So no tremolo, that works for me. This is from a company called Guitar Fetish. They make a line called GFS. That's sort of their nice, affordable but high-end line. So on the back, there is a control cavity where the controls would go, the 2 knobs and the switch, and all the wiring. There are holes drilled within the body for me to run wiring through. And then these are the 6 string holes that go straight through the body. I like that design. It's a classic. And I've got little sort of silver filing things to go in there to catch the strings. And then, of course, the holes for the neck are pre-drilled, but the neck itself is not. So this is actually the very first thing that I'm going to do, putting this piece together, is make sure that the neck is where it needs to be so that it matches up to these pre-drilled holes. So this is what we start with. What I'm going to need to do is get a neck for this, and also I'm going to need to shield with some black paint inside of these cavities where the pickups go to try to to keep interference out from the whole thing. And then of course I'm gonna have to wire it up. I've got all the parts that I need. I've got knobs, I've got the bridge, and I'm gonna start putting that together this week. And we'll see how it goes. But it starts obviously with the fun of a body. For the neck, I wanted to save money, but I found a nice neck on sale. Now, this is a Mighty Might neck. That's the brand. They've made replacement necks for guitars since the 70s or 80s. I always wanted a bird's eye maple neck. And bird's eye is just the type of maple it is. It's heavily figured. It has these little tiny circles as a naturally occurring pattern up and down the neck. I've just always found that attractive, but it costs more. And being, let's say, frugal instead of cheap, I never wanted to pay for the extra expense of a neck. And if you get a replacement neck directly from a major company, it might be closer to $250 or $300. This was, I think it was priced at $170 and I got it for about $135. It did need a little bit of work. The frets needed a little bit of cleaning up. They were a little sharp. Not too bad, though. This was actually in really good shape. I also added some hipshot tuners to this. These are simple screw-in models. They're very nice. I highly recommend these. These come with little plates, so you don't have to drill any holes in the neck. I have ruined a guitar neck already trying to learn what I'm doing with all of this. And I found out that this for like $60, this is a really good option. Whatever holes are already in your neck, this just drops straight in, and you don't have to put any more screw holes in it. They don't even have to match up to the old screw holes. And these are locking tuners too, so they'll be stable. So that's stage one. This is ready to go. Here's the problem. There are no holes in the back of the neck. Obviously, 4 bolts have to go through here to match up to the body to make everything work. That's what I'm working on now. That's the first thing. So I'm putting the tuners in, and I'm going to put the bridge on the body. And between those two things, then I can accurately align the neck, because there's a little wiggle room in the pocket where this goes. So I'm going to make sure that that's absolutely dialed in perfectly. It's probably the most important thing. Does the neck match the body perfectly so that it's straight? Otherwise, you're going to see that either one of the E strings might slide a little bit off, or it might be at an angle, and you don't want that, because then you're going to have to fill those holes and re-drill them, and that's not something that I know how to do. So it's vitally important that I get this right the first time. Once I do that, the rest is kind of easy. For pickups, I had a choice. This is designed for Gretsch Filtertron style pickups. So I looked around, and I could go with either Gretsch pickups made overseas. I could go with Gretsch pickups that were made in America and very expensive, or I could go with super high-end boutique pickups called TV Jones. TV Jones is the brand that's been making sort of these Gretsch 50s, 60s style humbucking pickups, an early humbucker model, the way that they used to, right? Like, this is what Brian Setzer uses, this is what all the rockabilly cats use. This is considered like the highest end Filtertron Gretsch style pickup. And I wasn't really sure if I wanted to invest that much. You know, I like to find bargains. I did find this pair on sale, so I have a matching set of neck and bridge pickups. But I decided this guitar really is speaking to me, and this humbucking design is close to my beloved mini humbuckers. It's a little bit smaller than a traditional humbucker, so the sound is a little brighter and a little tighter. So I figured if I'm going to go to all this trouble, and I want this to be a special guitar that I keep forever, I was willing to invest, on sale, in the highest quality pickups that I could get. So I'm really looking forward to trying these TV Jones pickups. These screws go straight into the wood of the body. There's no springs, there's no pick guard to attach them to. It's kind of basic and brutal in that regard. You just screws into wood and music comes out. So I'm looking forward to checking this out, but I'm a little scared because I've never installed this kind of pickup before and I've never used it before. So still, got to get it right because I've invested a lot. If I don't like how this sounds, I can sell the guitar, I can replace the pickups. I got them for about $120 a piece, which was on sale. So this was a major investment for me. One of these pickups cost more than the body did. And I have 2 pickups. So yeah, I want to make sure that these are exactly what I want. If I don't want them, somebody else will take them and I'll be able to fund a different alternative that fits in that hole. So we'll see what happens. This body came pre-drilled and pre-routed for all the electronics, but it did not come with any of the plastics. Like, there's no knobs, there's no switches. There's no pick guard on this particular model, but that also means that there's no cavity cover on the back. I could have just bought one, basic black, basic white, something like that, but you know me, I wanted something with some flash. So all this is just a plastic cover. It's about 1/8 of an inch deep. Well, as it just so happens, I have a laser cutter. Some of you may have seen some of the stuff that I've done with that laser cutter in previous Rocksmith giveaways, holiday ornaments, or I've burned in the Rocksmith logo into guitar straps and things like that. Well, so I just took some measurements of this hole, found some perloid 1/8 inch acrylic, and after a couple of tries, I actually got a couple of different things, and it just drops right in there. It's all laser cut, so it's super precise. I just have to drill 2 holes, and then that will cover all the electronics when I'm all done. I might try a couple of different versions of this to see like what pattern comes out, because the acrylic itself is masked, so it doesn't scorch or burn when I use the laser cutter. It is a laser. But I'm really happy with this. Like, this is something that I can say I made myself, and it's truly custom for this build. All right, so the last thing that I did was I painted some conductive paint to shield the cavities. This is to try to cut down on hum or electromagnetic interference. I don't know if this guitar really needs it. Some guitars have it, some guitars don't. Generally, in this style of guitar, if you had a pick guard that went over top of it, there would be foil shielding underneath it to try to reduce that. We're not doing that. We're just going to be putting the pickups directly into the wood. So my next goal is to attach the neck to the body, and I have a neck that does not have the holes pre-drilled. The body does, so we're using that as the example. In order to do that, I need to clamp it in place and make sure that it's aligned. Then that leads to the next question. How do you know that a neck is perfectly aligned before you start drilling holes in it? One method is to put tuners on the neck, which I have done, and then install the bridge in the guitar, which I'm about to do. And then from there, you put 2 strings, one on each side of the neck, the E's, and they act as straight edges. So you can sort of wiggle the neck around while it's clamped in place. Make sure that it's just where it needs to be so that those strings are not falling off of either side. Then mark holes in the neck and then come out with a drill press and do the really scary part of getting 4 holes in exactly the right spot. There are folks that'll tell you that it doesn't need to be really exactly the right spot, close enough. You can sort of pull it, you can wiggle it. It's wood, it's soft, it'll give a little bit, but this is the part of the whole thing that I am the most nervous about. The second most nervous part is installing the bridge. So this is a bridge that I've used before on other projects. It's a hardtail bridge. It's a Stratocaster style bridge with 6 individual saddles. It's got 3 screws that are going to attach it to the body. The holes that the strings will go through were already drilled on this body, so I've just aligned this. It aligns perfectly. The tape should be fine to keep the bridge in place while I'm drilling. Just because I'm paranoid, I found a couple of small screwdrivers that I can put into the screw holes, into the string holes, which might give it a little extra stuff, or it might get in the way, honestly. I don't know. I clearly don't know what I'm doing. All I really did was I made sure that I had the right size drill bit for the pilot holes that the bridge's manufacturer recommended. It's a Hipshot bridge. They suggested a 5/64 drill bit. I had, like most people have drill bit sets and they go everywhere and you completely forget which one is which. So I pulled out digital calipers and measured it. This is the correct bit. So all I have to do is do 3 simple straight down holes in the body and then put screws in there and it'll stay tight. Even if I'm a little bit off, like let's say it's just a smidge off, I should be able to compensate that with the saddles and it would be okay. But because you can't undrill something, I'm nervous. So I have this in slow speed and I'm gonna try to align it so that I've got this in the center or close enough to the center that it won't matter. And I think I'm ready to go. God, I'm so frightened. But I did it right. Okay, the first hole looks pretty good. So now I'm gonna do the same thing on the right side. I feel like I'm in the center of the hole, and here we go. I don't even know how far down to go. I think in a previous video I said this was basswood. It's not, it's poplar, so it's very soft. It's time to do the third. And then I'll go through this probably with a hand screwdriver and screw in the bolts that came with the screws that came with it. It came with 3 screws that are the correct size. So these are just pilot holes. I'm switching the drill to reverse to take it out. I'm not yanking anything. I'm going real slow. So I have 3 holes pretty much where I wanted them to be. I may need to actually make them a little bit wider. I'll see when I try to test fit the screws. If the screws just aren't going in, that means that I was too gentle and I used the too small of a bit. I've got larger bits. I can always take more wood out of a guitar body, but it's a pain in the butt putting it back in. So these are the screws that came with it. They're about 1 inch long. I probably did nowhere near that depth when I did the pilot hole, but these should slot right in. And I have my lucky screwdriver. I have very few lucky things in my life, but this screwdriver has helped me build PCs, guitars, you name it. Anything that needs a screwdriver. This crappy little screwdriver from Target has been my best friend. Okay, so it's pulling on a lot of wood. My wife points out, and she comes from a woodworking family, pilot holes are just there to give the screw something to grab onto to begin with. After that, you kind of do want it biting into a lot of wood. If you make the pilot hole too big, then it's just a hole and not a pilot hole at all. So, I am, it's not bad. I mean, I want it to be super secure, but it is definitely there. So now I can take away my tape. Oh, it actually was not aligned correctly. This is a mini nightmare for me. It probably is okay, Like this, look at the string holes and where the string holes are for the bridge. The strings will pass through these holes unimpeded. That's really not a problem. They're gonna go up into saddles anyway, so they won't be making contact with anything here. This is fine. But, you know, I don't know any better, so everything I kind of want to be perfect. Those of you watching who have more experience with woodworking or guitar building are probably like, what are you talking about? That's fine. But to me, like the fact that I can see from this angle some of the overhang there, you know, like I'm not 100%, but I think that's fine. I think I'm probably being too anal, and it doesn't matter. So from here, now we can start aligning the neck. So while I'm out here, I've realized I can put the string ferrules in. Ferrules are the tiny little pieces of metal, little metal cups that go in the back of a hardtail guitar. And when the string with a ball end or a bullet end or whatever end you have on there, that's what it catches into. This is what keeps it secure. I didn't know if these would be, I just ordered these because they were set. They're like, yeah, vintage Telecaster style body, these work. And I'm like, okay, I hope so. And they did sort of sit, and I was like, oh, okay, they didn't like go in smoothly. You kind of don't want them to. In the same way that you want a screw to catch on with some wood, you want to tap these into place. But of course, you don't want to tap them into place with like a giant hammer, but a giant rubber mallet is okay. So that's what I did for this one. We'll do a couple more to show you, but it's a little finishing step. I would say it's necessary. I've never seen a guitar without them, but it's one of those details that I almost forgot, and when I was building all the parts list, I had to go, oh, don't forget ferrules. I just bought them off of Amazon. You know, they're easy enough to find, but yeah, that's going to be one more thing before I put strings in it. These little string holder ferrules are going to be installed first. That's it. I mean, it's just a couple of taps with a soft hammer of some sort. I don't have to hit it too hard to get it to snug in. These are never coming out. They're designed to never come out. Look at that. Pretty as a purple thing. So here we are. I have installed the rest of the bridge. I put the saddles back on the bridge, and the ferrules are installed, so I was able to put some strings on. Now the purpose of these strings, these are just 9s. I have some spare 9s. I'm not even sure why. I don't even play 9s normally, but I found in my kit that I have a bunch of 9s. I just need something to act as a straight edge, and it's a lot easier to put strings on either side and then clamp the middle of the neck and see when you wiggle it around in the pocket where it should be. So pretty easily here I can see, all right, well that looks good actually. Like I can take lots of measurements if I want, but really this is kind of, are the E strings falling off the sides of the neck? If they're not, then it's probably okay. So from here, I would turn around and I would mark holes through the body holes into the neck so that then I can take the neck off again and do the actual drilling. Okay, what I'm doing now is I've got this clamped in the right place. I've looked at the strings. The strings all look properly aligned, and I'm going in with a drill bit, specifically a brad point drill bit that Brian Pody suggested I use. And now that I know that I really like where this is, I'm marking the back of the neck with little dimples based on the spiky point on this drill bit. And that's going to let me know where to drill tomorrow when I do it. I just have to go, I'm going to have little indentations that show me exactly where to drill, and I should be all set. This will be the drill bit that I use. It's a 3mm bit. It's the same as a 1/8 bit for all math purposes, and that's what is traditionally used on this style of guitar, so I feel pretty good about it. I just have to go slow, and I have to make sure that I put a little piece of masking tape on this as a flag to let me know when I've drilled enough. I will need to put the neck plate on and then go through the body to see how deep into this neck I should be cutting. I should not be cutting terribly deep. I will not want to go the whole length of that drill bit, so I need to know physically with some sort of physical symbol. A lot of people just use a little masking tape, blue tape, something like that, that as the drill bit is going down, when the tape starts making contact with the body, as I read online, one person said as the tape starts sweeping away the shavings, you're done. So there is a little sort of eyeballness to all of this, but I think I can do it. All right, now if you take a look, I've got 4 distinct holes in the corners around that Mighty Might logo. I've colored it in with pencil so that you can see them. So those are my pilot holes. So I've just measured the depth of the neck pocket and the neck plate that I intend to use. And I took a look at how far the actual screws that will be dropping in here, how far they stick out, right? They stick out about that far. Okay, so that's what I want. I don't need to drill any deeper than that into the neck. And of course, any further above that, we're going to start risking poking into the fretboard itself, which I don't want. So, in order to make that happen, here is my drill bit, and my drill bit has a little flag on it in the tape. So when I am using the drill press, or even if I use a hand drill, I think I'm going to use the drill press, but when I use the drill press, I drill into the neck up to the point that... Oh, have I done this backwards? Maybe I've done this backwards. Okay, I rechecked my math, following my rule of measure 1,000,000 times, drill once. This is a different depth. This is just as much as I need to drill into the neck. I had, for some reason, gotten confused and included the length of the screw that would be going through the body, which is already drilled. It's very important that I not drill too far, and that's what I would have done if I had used the previous calculations. So, oops. But we're good now.
And welcome back to the live portion of today's live stream. I am your host and community developer, Douglas Tilly. Hey, let's do a giveaway. If you are in the chat and you want to win our final Ernie Ball prize pack of the day, please listen for instructions or look for instructions from Brian Turner. That's UB Jurassic in the chat. He is our community manager in North Carolina. He will tell you how you can win a package with everything that you see here. You're going to get a couple sets of strings for Ernie Ball, both the regular Slinky, one for your 6-string guitar, one for your 4-string bass. You're going to get a dozen Everlast picks for Ernie Ball of varying sizes, or one of 2 varying sizes. You're going to get a black Ernie Ball guitar strap, a package of Ernie Ball Wonder Wipes, a peg winder from Ernie Ball, which will help you affix those strings to your guitar, and you're going to get a pick or 2 from us, the Spectrum Plectrum variety from us here at Ubisoft San Francisco. I want to thank all of our guests today. Dan Emmerich, thank you for part 1 of your guitar build. As always, thank you to Audrey and Kate for those thrilling performances, and thank you to Layla Abdul Rauf. You can find Dan has some stuff going on, Hero Falls. You can find Audrey and Kate at Audrey123 Talks on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, and Spotify now with Audrey and Kate. And then Layla Abdul Rauf, you can also find on Spotify for her solo music, as well as Ionophore. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We will be with you next week. And yeah, enjoy your time.